Chapter 6, Dhyana Yoga, the Yoga of Meditation. We'll first offer some respects to our gurus and to Krishna. Panchitam amritam yatu shirupa raghunathayo tadane truti lesham yaha sahateno Narasingha Pachadakari Siddhanta Sarasvati Samasama Bhakti Vedanta Sishyasa Vande Swami Narasingha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Verse 1. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Anashrita Karma Palam Karyam Karma Karoti Aha Sasanyasi Cha Yogi Cha Na Niragnir Na Chakriyaha. Bhagavan Sri Krishna said, one who performs his prescribed duties and renounces the results of those actions is a yogi and a sannyasi. One does not become a sannyasi simply by rejecting the performance of sacrifice and performing no activities. Verse 2. Yam sannyasam iti prabhur yogam tan vidi pandava naya sannyasta sankalpo yogi bhavati kaschana. O son of Pandu, that which is known as sannyas is the same as yoga. One can never become a yogi without renouncing the desire to satisfy the senses. Verse 3. Arurukshor munir yogam karma karanam uchate yoga rudashata shaiva shama karanam uchate. For one who is a beginner on the path of yoga, action is the means. For one who is already practiced in yoga, the renunciation of action is the means. Verse 4. Yadahe nindriyarteshu na karmasvanu sashate sarva sankalpa sannyasi yoga rudhas tadochate. When one is neither attached to the sense objects nor to the activities that lead to their enjoyment, at that time one is said to have attained yoga. Verse 5. Udaret atmanatmanam natmanam avasadayat atmaiva yatmano bandhur atmaiva ripur atmanaha. Living beings must elevate themselves by the mind. They must not degrade themselves. Certainly the mind is the friend of the living beings as well as their worst enemy. Verse 6. Bandhuratmat manastasya yena maivatmana jitaha anatmana sisatrutve vartetatmaiva satrupata. For one who has subdued the mind is a friend. However, for one who has not controlled the mind is the greatest enemy. Verse 7. Jitatmana prashantasya paramatma samahitaha sitoshna sukha dukeshu tatamanapamanayo. Those who have subdued the mind and are calm attain realization of Paramatma, superconsciousness. For such persons, heat and cold, happiness and distress, and honor and dishonor are all the same. Anuvritti commentary by His Divine Grace Jagad Swami, Bhakti Gaurava Narasingha Maharaja. Many commentators on Bhagavad Gita have mentioned that the method of meditation spoken of in the 6th chapter is derived from the eightfold process of yoga known as Ashtanga Yoga. The famous compiler of the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali, has explained the sequential order of the Ashtanga Yoga system as follows. First, One should practice yama, that consists of observances such as rising from bed before sunrise, taking baths, study of the Vedas, and performing puja, rituals. Niyama consists of controlling the senses by following regulative principles such as no intoxication, no illicit sex, no gambling, and no eating of meat, fish, or eggs. Next, one begins the practice of asana by physically conditioning the body through systematic bodily exercises and postures aimed at toning and bringing into balance one's entire physical organism. Then one advances to the performance of pranayama, controlling the inward and outward breath by systematic breathing exercises performed in conjunction with various asanas. When asanas and pranayama are performed or taught just for the sake of health, this is sometimes called hatha yoga. After pranayama follows pratyahara, or withdrawing the senses from the sense objects and training the mind to become introspective and intuitively orientated. Then one is able to concentrate the mind on a single point without being disturbed. This is known as dharana, or attaining concentration. Once having acquired the ability to concentrate the mind without distraction from external sources, one can begin actual meditation, or dhyana. There are many forms of meditation in the yoga system. However, none of them recommend concentrating on nothingness. The three principal objects of meditation in yoga are Brahman, transcendental light, Paramatma, localized superconsciousness, and Bhagavan, Sri Krishna. Samadhi is the final stage of Astanga Yoga, wherein the yogi, at the time of quitting the material body, attains the object of his desired perfection. The yogis who desire Brahman or Paramatma realization enter the Brahmajyoti after giving up their body, and the yogi who desires Bhagavan realization enters into the supreme abode of Krishna, known as Vaikuntha or Goloka Vrindavan, to associate with and participate in transcendental pastimes with Krishna. According to many masters of yoga, only Bhagavan realization is eternal. Even after attaining Brahman or Paramatma realizations and merging into the Supreme Brahman, a yogi will once again have to come back to the material world and begin again the cycle of birth and death. This is said to be due to the intrinsic nature of all living beings to perform activities. Although in the Brahmajyoti there is a sense of bliss that is many thousands of times greater than material happiness, still the desire to act remains. But because the Brahman realized yogi and the Paramatma realized yogi are not qualified to perform devotional activities in the association of Krishna, they cannot enter the spiritual planets and must therefore come down to take birth again in the material world. I'll add a note here. In the Brahman effulgence, in the merged state, when the individual unit of consciousness merges into the light rays springing from the body of the Supreme Person, it loses its awareness of individuality. And therefore there are no relationships going on in that merged state. But because the intrinsic nature of the soul is to love and to be loved, it must come again back into the material world. It cannot go into the spiritual world because it has not perfected its love for Krishna. Therefore it comes back into the material world seeking love. Verse 8, Gana Vigana Triptatma Kutasto Vijitindriyaha Yukta Ityuchate Yogi Samalos Kanchanaha. The yogi who is self-satisfied due to his knowledge and realization, fixed in his spiritual nature and in control of his senses, sees dirt, stones, and gold equally. Verse 9. Suhrin Ritar Udasina Madhyasta Dvesha Bandushu Sadhu Swapicha Papeshu Samabuddhir Vishishate. Such a yogi of impartial intelligence sees an honest well-wisher, an affectionate benefactor, an enemy, neutral persons, a mediator, the envious, a relative, the pious and the impious with equal vision. Verse 10. Yogi yunjita satatam atmanam rahasi stitataha ekakiyata chittatma nirasir aparigraha. A yogi should live in a solitary place with his mind and body fully controlled. He should be without desire, without a sense of possessiveness, and must constantly fix his mind on the Atma, the self within. Verse 11 and 12. Shuchaudeshi pratistapya sthiramasanam atmanaha nat yucharitam nati nicham kailajina kushotaram tatraikagram manakritva yata chitindriya kriyaha upavishasane yunyad yogamatma vishuddhaye. Establishing a seat in a clean environment that is not too high or too low, a yogi should cover his sitting place with kusha grass, a deer skin, and a cloth. Sitting on that seat, fixing his mind on one point and controlling all the activities of the mind and senses, he should practice yoga to purify himself. Verse 13 and 14. Samam kaya shiro grivam dharayana chalam stiraha Samprekshanasikagram swam tishachana valokayan prashantatma vigatatbir brahmacharya bhate sitaha mana samyamya machito yukta asita matparaha. Holding the body, head, and neck straight, he should remain still and steady, gazing at the tip of the nose without casting his glance in other directions. Undisturbed, fearless, and observing a vow of celibacy, he should sit and control his mind by thinking of me as his highest goal. Verse 15. Yunyan evam sadatmanam yogini yatamanasaha shantim nirvana paramam matsamstam adhigacchati. In this way, the yogi controls his mind, withdrawing it from material desires. He then achieves supreme peace and liberation from material existence and attains my abode. Verse 16. Nat yashnatastu yogosti na chaikantam anashnataha na chati swapna shilasha jagrato naiva charjuna. One cannot practice yoga by eating too much or too little, nor sleeping too much or too little, O Arjuna. Verse 17. Yukta hara viharasya yukta chetasya karmasu yukta swarnava bodhasya yoga bhavati dukkhaha. Yoga destroys the suffering of one who is moderate in eating and relaxation, who performs all activities in a regulated manner and is well balanced in sleeping and waking. Anuvritti commentary by Srila Guru Maharaj. Sri Krishna again informs Arjuna in verse 15 that the final goal of yoga is to attain his supreme abode, Vaikuntha or Goloka Vrindavan. This is indeed the ultimate goal of the yoga system. One cannot be a yogi if one eats too much or not enough. Eating too much also means eating things like non-vegetarian foodstuff to maintain the body. This is not actually required. Nor can one be a yogi if one does not eat enough. This also means that one should not abstain from eating milk products by considering it as non-vegetarian. Milk is the most complete food possible. Milk products help to develop a strong bodily constitution and nourish our brain cells and thus our thinking capacity. Yoga is something that has been practiced in India for thousands of years, and from then until now, yogis have recommended taking milk and milk products like yogurt and cheese, etc. Only in recent times have some people thought it bad to take milk products, but the masters of yoga have never recommended such abnegation. Proper sitting posture, control of the senses, and observing celibacy are also recommended in the above verses because without such practices, no one can actually be a yogi. Gazing at the tip of the nose without casting one's glance in other directions means being perfectly concentrated, as in dharana, and performing dhyana, or meditation on Krishna, as the highest goal. As far as possible, a yogi should try to live in a holy place to practice yoga. In India, yogis are fond of residing on the banks of the Ganges at Hardwar, Rishikesh, Benares, or Mayapur, or on the banks of another sacred river like the Jamuna, Kaveri, or Godavari. Some yogis prefer the sanctuary of the Himalayas. Others prefer residence in the Charadhams, Dwarka, Badrinath, Jagannath Puri, and Rameshwaram. In any case, the yogi must choose the proper place to practice yoga. If one is unable to live in a holy place or on the banks of a sacred river, then one should try to live in an ashram or yoga community. If one is unable to live in a yoga community, then one should sanctify one's home by creating a place where Krishna can be worshipped and mantra meditation can be performed. The home should have an atmosphere conducive for contemplation, study, and controlling the senses. Such a home should be peaceful and free from acts of violence, animal killing, intoxication, etc. In this modern age of Kali Yuga, animal killing, intoxication, and so many other unfavorable activities are to be found everywhere. Subsequently, it is very difficult to find the appropriate place for yoga practice, especially for the practice of Ashtanga Yoga, Raja Yoga, Hatha Yoga, and so on. Therefore, in Kali Yuga, the recommended process is Bhakti Yoga, and meditation is performed through the chanting of the Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The chanting of the Maha Mantra is so powerful and purifying that wherever it is chanted, it makes that place purified. Thus, the Bhakti Yoga process can be practiced everywhere and anywhere. Bhakti Yoga is actually the only recommended process of yoga in Kali Yuga. The yogi must always strive for self-satisfaction, knowledge, and realization. Such a yogi will always see everything in this world with equal vision and therefore will not become attached to anything of a temporary nature. Krishna says that the yogi sees gold and mere stones as the same. This is not to say that the yogi cannot distinguish the brilliance of gold from that of ordinary objects. This means that the yogi is not attracted to finding satisfaction in the accumulation of wealth. It has been said that the desire for wealth is what makes the world go round. This may be true in the sense that the desire for wealth is what drives most people to act. Sadly, we also see clearly where greed for wealth is taking the world today. Political unrest culminating in war, death, and destruction, economic instability and collapse, as well as an extreme instability in the environment. This results in natural disasters and the extinction of many species of life.